Hello, welcome everyone to the BrightTALK webinar titled How DevOps, NetOps and Automation are Changing the IT Landscape. My name is Haidee McMahon and I work as Senior Engineering Manager in WPEngine. I have over 20 years experience in software development and today I'll be moderating our panel discussion. So without further ado, I would like to introduce you to our three panelists today. We have Tarak, who's CTO from TekNirvana. We have Kingston, co-founder of PALC Network, and we have Cantwell, Senior Software Engineer from WPEngine. So I'd like to welcome Tarak, Kingston, and Joe today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Haidee.
Great. So just to kick off, let's understand how, well, actually before we kick off, understanding how it's changing, it would be great to get some background to each of you in more depth. So maybe Tarak, could I ask you to go first? And
absolutely.
Great, thanks Tarak.
Haidee, thank you very much, and it is a pleasure to be here this morning. My name is Tarak, and as Haidee mentioned, I am the founder and CTO of TekNirvana, which is a management and IT consulting firm. We perform services in both the U.S. federal sector as well as commercial services. Personally, I've been in the IT space for about 25 years, and my background primarily is systems integration and software development. But as any other IT professional, over the years, I've evolved into performing network administration, enterprise architecture, and all other areas of IT. And most recently, I've been very active in the DevOps, agile, and cloud computing spaces for both commercial and the federal sector.
Brilliant. Thanks, Tarak. You're very welcome today. Kingston, would you like to introduce yourself and give us an idea of your background as well?
Yeah, sure, Haidee. Yeah, thanks, Tarak, and thanks, Haidee. So I'm Kingston. So I'm the co-founder of a company called PALC Networks, and typically I have around 15 years of experience in the networking side, both in datacom as well as the telecom space. And from PALC Networks, what we do was basically we work typically on the data center as well as the cloud computing side, wherein we work from the basics of the networking as well as how the different applications, how the infrastructure is getting orchestrated. Basically, we are working on both on-prem as well as basically the public infrastructure like AWS. And we also basically provide services to our customers in terms of how to provide a hybrid cloud infrastructure or how to basically scale in and scale out your infrastructure with public cloud with security aspects. So prior to founding PALC Networks, I was working for Cisco and I was working for a startup called IP Fusion. And typically, I have been working, starting my basically my career from a protocol developer to network architect, and right now, typically we are concentrating more on a complete enterprise solution provider in terms of both application space as well as networking space. Coming to the DevOps and DevOps side, we have been working in the area of SDN, NFV, and the network virtualization from almost for last 5 years. And the term NetOps basically how it's being getting used in the current DevOps environment. Probably I can talk a little bit more on that in today's panel discussion.
Great, thank you, Kingston, and a very big welcome to you as well. And our third panelist, Joe Cantwell from WPEngine.
Yeah, hi.
Hi.
Hello again. My name is Joe Cantwell. I'm a senior staff software engineer with WPEngine. We've got like over 20 years in software development, so we've all been at this a long time. It's been mostly in the R&D field. More recently, I have moved into an SRE position within the company, which is kind of exciting and terrifying. But it brings me much more into the DevOps focus and where DevOps stops and SRE starts. and the kind of changing mindset. And also, I guess my task is to bring the developer mindset to an SRE team. So I think that's me in a nutshell.
That's great. I think we have a wealth of experience around the table, and I'm really looking forward to this discussion. So I'll throw out the question, well, how is DevOps, NetOps automation changing the IT landscape? Who would like to offer their opinions first?
Yeah, I can jump in really quickly just to start the ball rolling.
Thank you.
Ultimately, I guess this all started where it was back in the agile kicked it all off, right? There was clearly a need for business to be able to move faster, to get to market earlier, and do all this stuff. And software, by its nature, where you were broken into software developers and operations and network operations, and all these guys that were their own specialities in their field and subject matter experts, what would happen is software would get developed, maybe potentially quite quickly, and then come to a complete stop while the next process took over. And basically, DevOps was the idea of DevOps. I think it's been around for 8 or 10 years, and it's like kind of a cross collaboration, for want of a better word, to remove these knowledge silos between different departments, and also actually to ease the process and flow of software from development straight through to, well, we call it production, but it could be pre-production, but to get it out there essentially in front of somebody, whether that be a stakeholder or a customer or whatever that might be. And that has massive benefits, and it's worked. I think everyone would agree it's worked really well in the last number of years. Companies have implemented it at different levels and different approaches and stuff like that. Depending on what the company does and the level of risk that it's willing to essentially sign up to, it can move faster than other companies. And there may be a market payback for that. But also it's always the risk-reward thing, and some companies have still been held back by that. There's also the concept of Conway's law, which essentially just a paraphrase of bigger organizations and the way they organize their structures feeds down into the way they write their software. So those companies with big overhead and big management structures tend to be slow-moving anyway, and that has held back DevOps to some effect. But at the same time, smaller companies or companies that are more, I'll use the term agile, have moved a lot faster, have brought DevOps to essentially its natural conclusion where they can push out. And now they're looking at other roadblocks around security, around network operations and all that kind of thing, performance. And this is where things like NetOps and all these other things come into play. So I think that's my 2 cents, kind of as a brief overview.
Great, Joe. That's excellent.
I guess,
can I call it Kingston, or is that Tarak?
Yeah, that was me, Tarak. I guess I'll go next. So, Joe, I completely agree with you, and that was definitely more than 2 cents. That was probably more like 200 cents. But yes, I completely agree with you. I think the biggest change that I have seen over the past decade or so is a focused convergence of the different disciplines. So whereas in the past we had very clearly identified silos of disciplines. You had your software development team, you had your testing teams, you had network admins, system admins, different operational teams, and they all operated in silos. And it worked pretty well for a number of years. But as Joe pointed out, when we started moving to agile development, we started uncovering problems in different areas. And as one area became more efficient, other areas became choke points and bottlenecks. And so they were almost forced to improve themselves. And ultimately, this, I believe, has led to a convergence of disciplines where you have developers, different production support people, network people, security folks, all working together to help create a more efficient pipeline from requirements to deployment, whether the deployment is in pre-production or production. And at the same time, there's been an evolution of the business. They understand IT more as well as the customers who demand more from the businesses. And so that's another convergence that's happening as well, where the customers, the business, and the actual producers are converging too. And ultimately, all of this is leading to a constant rapid evolution of the tools and technologies that we are using to deliver these systems, and more automation. So it's all a big virtuous circle.
Very good. Kingston, have you anything more to add to both Joe and Tarak's insights?
Yeah, a few more cents from the networking perspective, right? So basically, if you see the deployment of all your applications quite some time back, typically the network was never been a programmable network, right? The network always we say it is a configurable network, and every standard vendors, network providers will have a standard set of CLI commands wherein you just basically will be able to configure the protocol, right? So what really started happening here was when the development as well as operation was started getting evolved into a DevOps cycle. There was really a need in the networking industry to be more flexible, to make the network as a programmable network rather than a configurable network, right? That's where the technologies or the importance of software-defined networking and network function virtualization came in, and this exposes the network from a standard-based interface towards a non-standard-based interface to a standard-based interface, wherein it can be programmed by a kind of a controller, which we call as an SDN controller, which again be called from an application perspective, right? So now with these complete infrastructure in place, wherein we have an advent of virtualization, a containerization, Dockerization, application is moving more towards virtualization. There was a very clear necessity of network virtualization that has to happen from the networking world, and the networking world started opening up their APIs or interfaces, which basically work in very closely with respect to the DevOps automation infrastructure. Okay, though the term NetOps hasn't been kicked off like the way the DevOps has popularized. I would say that a couple of years from now, the NetOps also will become a major role, which will be part of the DevOps infrastructure. Because with the increase of the application-centric infrastructure or intent-based networking, wherein a specific application wanted to deploy or wanted to have a clear requirement from the networking space, right? So that has to be configured from the application from the design level itself, right? So this has been started in the current environment. However, it has been gone into the next level. But in future, you will be talking more about the NetOps as well as the DevOps working hand in hand.
Okay, so you've covered quite a bit of insight there, and I suppose what I would like to just ask, so it does sound very complicated, and it does sound like, a lot of worlds are coming together. What is the real impact, and I suppose the pros and the cons for moving in this direction for your business? Who would like to?
Not to be the guy to jump in first every time, but I guess just to kind of close out on the conversation, one of the points that Tarak made and then Kingston has followed up on is essentially a lot of this stuff is moving very quickly. I know that Tarak mentioned this kind of, it's almost this knowledge transfer and cross collaboration, but from a developer, myself as a developer, there is an onus and a requirement on the developer. Like the concept of being a software engineer or a test engineer or a DevOps engineer, the lines are just becoming, or even a network engineer for that matter, the lines are becoming completely blurred, because everything from, the way that software and infrastructure is managed moves to software. We're all software engineers. And then what happens, how does that work when you have you're a domain expert in just writing applications that live in a container in the application, but you're not that strong with maybe the networking or the security aspects of it yet, but because it's in code, you feel like every software engineer, they think they can solve every problem there is, just give me the code, right? And there is stuff like Terraform and all these other tools that are just infrastructure as code. So it's like another string to your bow without maybe necessarily having the deep understanding that's required to get the best out of these tools. That's certainly something that I see from your average engineer's perspective. there is an onus on us to be much more a jack of all trades in that sense. That you can't just, like, even in WPEngine specifically, the concept of a DevOps engineer really no longer exists. You were a software engineer, and you may know more about DevOps than the guy beside you, but ultimately it's up to any given engineer to make sure that the application that they write, that the pipeline and the tests and everything else is there, is in line with what's expected from the business.
Okay. Yeah. So what you're saying there is really the career paths, I suppose, as what were defined before as a software engineer, are starting to kind of get more blurred, and you have to reach out into different areas that may not have been your area of subject matter expertise.
Certainly, yeah. There's a new level of expectation on anybody coming into this industry, or even anybody in the industry, as to what's expected of them in order to deliver an application. Because between the product owner and the customer, what they determine they want, and the speed that it gets up, into production, you are responsible for a large section of that pipeline in general. Now, obviously that varies from organization to organization, but certainly the faster moving organizations, any given software engineer is responsible for a larger part of that pipeline. And that brings its own challenges.
Okay, so maybe just on that point, Joe, where you mentioned challenges, I'd like to ask Kingston and Tarak, what are their thoughts on the challenges of this new, well, I suppose not new, but this evolving landscape?
Right. So, again, just building on what Joe said, I'll take a slightly different take on it. So Joe talked more about how the challenge for the IT professional has become greater because they have to have a broader knowledge base, whereas before you could be pigeonholed in your area of expertise. Now, because of the way IT is operating, even as a software engineer, you need to know other disciplines. A network engineer needs to understand more than just how configuration works. They need to understand how their application is tied in with the network so that they can optimally work with the team as part of the team to deploy it. So that's definitely a challenge. But there's another challenge as well, because as one benefit of having domain expertise, or sort of like an assembly line mentality, is that you have specialists working in each area. And so you can have a good level of assurance that whatever work is being done in that area is being done according to whatever the standards are for that domain. As you have people crossing over, for example, a software engineer also working on the security side, there's a possibility that some standards might be missed. And in this whole spirit of getting things done faster, deploying faster, having more releases per year, maintaining the cadence, sometimes it's possible that shortcuts might be taken, or things might be overlooked, or just because you have somebody who's not a domain expert doing a function, there might be something that's overlooked. And so that makes it even more important to have the level of standardization and automation that DevOps is preaching, to make sure, because it facilitates having that crossover of disciplines. By having the level of consistency, standardization, the governance structure in place with the automation, you can facilitate the crossover of disciplines. And I think that is one of the biggest takeaways or the lessons learned over the years of implementing DevOps is you really need to standardize and automate to make this a reality.
Yeah, no, very good point.
Very good. So with these challenges, I suppose, and you mentioned some of the benefits to the business, like the agility, the speed to delivery, the automation. Is this, I suppose, could you say, yeah, every business should jump on this? Is this something that really you're missing out if you're not considering in this space? Can I offer that out to anybody to answer?
So yeah, maybe I can go first. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, please do. So please do, Tarak.
Oh, I'll keep it short. So I think working in the federal space, I've gotten a different look at how they view DevOps and automation. So I've done work on both the commercial side as well as the federal government, as well as highly regulated industries like the banking sector. And a lot of times, there's two questions that get mixed together. The first question is, should we do DevOps? And then the second question is, should we use DevOps to deploy into production? And I think if you merge the questions together, you're doing yourself a disservice. And the questions should really be taken apart and evaluated separately. So for the first question, whether you should be doing DevOps or not, I think it's been proven enough over the past decade that DevOps is real. The tools are mature enough. There's enough knowledge and expertise and skill sets in the professionals that practice DevOps to make this a reality and deliver real benefits to both the organization as well as the end users. So I think that's almost a definite yes, that your organization should be adopting DevOps in some form. The second question is trickier, and that question is, should you be deploying all the way to production using DevOps? So should you have automated deployments all the way into production? And that really depends on the industry that you're in. If you're in a high-risk industry, in the banking sector, in the healthcare sector, if you're in the federal government and there's compliance and regulatory requirements that you need to meet, maybe you don't go all the way to production. You stop at pre-production, and then the last step still has some manual components in it. But DevOps is definitely real, and almost every organization, with maybe a few exceptions, should be at least doing DevOps all the way to a pre-production. And then between pre-production and production, which I call the last mile, that's where there's some gray area that needs to be looked at on a case-by-case basis.
Mm-hmm. Very good.
Yeah, I think I was really just going to reiterate what Tarak said. Just when people talk about CI/CD, the CD in that is actually can be two things. It can be continuous delivery or continuous deployment. And really the only difference between the two of them is that continuous delivery means you're straight up to essentially a pre-production mode, and somebody's got to go in and actually make a decision to press a button to move to production. And then continuous deployment is essentially it. That somebody merges the master or whatever that kicks off a whole subset of tasks and tests and, maybe integration tests and, resulting in ultimately an eventual deploy onto your production servers in your regions around the world, or wherever it's actually structured. And that there is no right or wrong, as to which one of those we choose. It's entirely down to the business and again, back to the level of risk that they think the business can handle.
And Kingston, have you anything to add to that? Yeah, great, thanks.
Yeah, from my perspective, right, what I would say was, as Tarak has clearly mentioned that most of the organization clearly practices DevOps in one or the other format, okay? However, one thing which is basically missed based upon what level you are going to do your DevOps, right? Two major things are missed out as of now, which will get a predominant role in the future. One of the aspects was the security aspect, right? Though most of the enterprises are putting a lot of effort in terms of the security of how they are deploying the applications and the applications interrelationship. However, we will be seeing more action in terms of the security. And the second one is basically from the network into consideration, right? I would say that both security and network will go in hand. So when we are doing our DevOps practices, these two things will be taken more considerations in the near future, because what eventually may happen was whatever the DevOps practices, the deployments you are having it, you may need to consider the network also into the equation, because the network is one of the major factors which produces a latency across the applications, right? So the more and more applications are getting containerized and more containers are parking under a different infrastructures, the more and more importance you may need to pay in terms of basically network latency. So as part of your CI/CD process, the continuous deployment process, definitely the considerations of network will come into picture, though it is not considered in most part of the CI/CD, the deployment automation cycle.
Okay, very good. I just want to apologize. We've had a couple of pieces of feedback from the audience on the sound, so I do apologize. Unfortunately, we don't have anything we can do here because it's actually quite clear from our end.
Yeah,
so apologize for that. We'll continue with the discussion. I suppose what next? I suppose, you know, to really understand and you may have covered part of this in some of the discussion already, but to really understand the business value of this, you know, I'm hearing, you know, security is important. That kind of brings with it risk. You know, maybe just get some more insights into, you know, the real business value of going this way.
It's simple. The real business value is essentially almost the time to market, right? You're not like going back in the day. You would deliver maybe once or twice a year, and then it was this big thing, a big upfront feature. So the customer would have to wait 6 months to see something or get something. Now it's a case of literally, you know, on an agile, you're not even cutting feature branches anymore, right? So you're pushing out stories, tweaks, bug fixes, small changes. Customers seeing that on a regular basis, and then I think maybe Tarak mentioned that earlier as well. That drives a level of expectation from the customer, and that ties them back to you as a platform or a service provider, that they see that this thing is actively progressing, and that their feedback, whether it be through whatever forms or however you engage with the customers, they can see that feedback coming to real life. You know, that this is something I asked for, and hey presto, here's this feature here. So really, it's all down to, you know, well, from my understanding and perspective, it's just down to, you know, the monetary value of you get it out there, you get it working quickly. I mean, there is, again, it's back, I keep sounding like a scratch record here when I talk about risk, but when you deploy more often, more frequently, you're deploying smaller pieces of code. What that does is it basically means that if something goes wrong, it's easier to find out what the problem is. Generally, if something goes wrong, it's, you know, every time you deploy, you've got a full suite of automated tests. If you do find a bug, you put in regression testing so it doesn't happen again, and it just makes everything happen safer. So everyone's got this level of comfort. Like I remember, not even that long ago, we would do a deploy on a weekly basis for a company that I work for, and it was a big financial system, and every week it was just pressure all morning. You put this thing live, and then we were all mic'd up, everyone right up to the CTO, and we would go through what the steps were, and we'd have a checklist, and each check would be timed, and it'd say, I'll do this, I'll do that. Like, nobody wants to go back to those times. There's just pressure and stress for everybody. And I really like this quick, often just move, but incremental steps. Things just work in general, you know. Yeah.
And I suppose then in that, it's probably easier to back out of anything that goes wrong. Like you can, you know, is it, I suppose, as easy as you can deploy? Is it as easy to roll back? Should something?
Right.
Yeah. So let somebody else jump in there. I'm hogging the limelight.
Is that you, Tarak?
Right. Yes. So yeah, as always, I agree with Joe. I'd like to share a short story, and I think that will help demonstrate some of the value of DevOps as well. So about 10 years ago, I was hired on as an architect in a major consulting company, and my job was to help fix problem projects. And one of the first projects that I got put on was a huge project for a state within the U.S. And the project has been going on for 2 years. It was a 4-year project. And in 2 years, they were really behind on the delivery. And what had been happening is that the project manager had been submitting monthly reports. And the reports basically were, I was supposed to spend X amount of money, and I spent X amount of money. And the management at this consulting company were happy because everything's on track. We're spending as much money as we were supposed to. We're not overspending anything, and that's great. But what they were missing is that what were they getting for that money that they were spending? And so what ended up happening is at the end of 2 years, out of the 4-year project, they spent half their budget, but they had only delivered 10% of the functionality. And so now they got into a pickle where they only had half the budget left, and they still had 90% of the functionality to deliver. So the moral of the story is cost-based tracking is not a good option, and that's why earned value management came to such a prominence. Well, with DevOps, you automatically get earned value management because it's all about what you're delivering into production or pre-production. So that's what agile has always been about, with the story points and measuring your velocity on a constant basis. And that's exactly what DevOps does for the rest of IT as well. Because you're constantly deploying, constantly fixing bugs, constantly delivering functionality to customers, you're automatically practicing earned value management. And so it's not just about the work that the people are doing, but it's all about the value that's being produced. And with DevOps, that value becomes readily apparent to everybody.
Very good. So I suppose, just in terms of DevOps and NetOps, where are these two worlds? So I suppose like NetOps is moving more and more into the software space, the networks are moving more into software space, and with the applications in software space, where is all this coming together? How's it looking for a business? Can we kick off our discussion?
Sure, we can. I think Kingston might be good
Yes.
to start with.
Yeah. So I would just explain one of the scenario what our customer has gone through. So basically what is happening was they are a big enterprise customer wherein they were deploying their applications in a kind of Kubernetes kind of environment. It's been deployed across multiple clouds. Okay. So one of the major problem what they were facing was basically how to optimally deploy my the containers or the VMs so that I'll be using the I'll be reducing the infrastructure cost in terms of spending the money for per bit, right? So if you are deploying an application A which is constantly talking to an application B, and if you wanted to keep if you somehow keep this application across two different data centers or two different racks or two different pods, what would happen was you might end up in having a huge communication between these applications, and which literally provides a lot of latency in your communication, right? So they wanted to have some kind of optimization in terms of how they are deploying their applications, and what are all the applications need to be deployed inside a single network, and what are all the application has to be deployed in a different network, what are all the security considerations we have to take care of it, right? So this is one of the exercise basically we work along with that customer, and basically we did an exercise of how the different applications interact with each other in terms of the message communications, in terms of the security barrier. So then what we did was basically we created a kind of a software defined controller application which is talking to the Kubernetes or the VM orchestrator in terms of OpenStack, right? So what happens was when this application is getting deployed, we know that, okay, this application is getting deployed in this particular VM infrastructure servers or VMs. And what we started doing was, if the application cannot coexist because of security reasons, we started kind of providing a specific quality of services for that application alone across these two servers. Right. So what eventually it happened was basically they started finding out their applications are scaling very well. So the NetOps is very, very important when you go for a massive scale application and when you wanted to deploy your application in a clustered environment. And eventually this is a practice which has to come from a design of the software till to the deployment.
Yeah, so that's with my SRE hat on, like, that's absolutely very interesting because it isn't quite the, well, it works on my machine thing, especially when you're deploying into Kubernetes and stuff, but application developers specifically do feel, that they really rarely think outside of the level of their container. So my application's running in a container, it's talking to some other service. Oh, I have a microservice architecture, I have this, I have that, but ultimately the latency on the system, isn't really my responsibility. I mean, this is the kind of a mindset that you will find, and I think it's prevalent anywhere, but, you do come up against that time and time again. People just don't think about network latency and how their application is architected, where, it could actually fall down. The concept of, back to SRE, the concept of SLIs, so service level indicators, within, and if you approach application development from the concept of a service level indicator, and you use something like maybe requests, 50% of requests happen under X milliseconds or whatever, and you use that as an SLO or use it as a metric, as an SLI or something, then that actually does feed back into what you're saying, Kingston. But I think what actually, in reality, what happens is it probably feeds back too late. As you push a distributed application into a Kubernetes cluster, it comes under some load from customers or users, and then you're seeing latency in the system that you didn't expect to see because you didn't think about how your software or how your networking was actually would react in that situation, with distributed endpoints and whatnot. So I think good point, and everything feeds back to the people talking to each other as soon as possible. Like, I mean, when these things are envisioned, that we're going to build a microservice architecture or some kind of distributed system to do something, that we need people like Tarak and Kingston in the room. It's the only way this thing's going to be a success.
Mm-hmm. Very good. So I suppose what's missing? What's missing in this environment? Apart from talking to each other.
Well, that seems like a small thing, talking to each other, but in actual fact, it is a big thing because this is back to, I think, what we all touched on earlier, was the attitude in the company to move fast is generally it's back to the Facebook kind of move fast and break things, or not, as the case may be, but you do find people maybe getting, because the tools will bring people to, like software-defined networks. I don't know anything about software-defined networks, but I can write Terraform scripts, so I can get something up and running, but it might be anywhere near as good as what Kingston would do, right? And these are problems that people, I would say, like me, find ourselves doing these things, and they work, but they don't work as good or as good. I sound like WPEngine is a dodgy platform. It's not. We have people to do this. In case anyone's thinking it's not. But I'm just trying to labour the point that tools take us so far, and sometimes they take us further than maybe where we should be. They do take us out of our comfort zone, and they can bring extra risk or whatever that might be into the business. And it's getting subject matter experts, into at the right time, because ultimately this is all a cost thing. Software costs, and people have to pay for it. And say, well, what can they do? Well, we need to get Kingston in here to define this, to make sure our network is secure as could be. We need to get Tarak in here to make sure that our DevOps pipeline is going to be as efficient as it can be. And that's not always possible. It's just in the software market, certainly in this country, and I'm sure pretty much worldwide, is really do you know what I mean? It's like a seller's market, essentially. So these are problems that businesses face. Is finding this information.
Do you want to, Kingston or Tarak, do you want to add to kind of the discussion of what's missing or anything like that? Yeah, great.
Yeah, I would agree, Joe, to that point. Actually, the biggest missing piece here was the interactions between the different stakeholders, right? So till now, the application developers always think that, okay, I have a requirement, I have to program this, and I have to deploy it, right? So this is much beyond that, actually, right? So what they have to think about is they have to think about different aspects into it right now, especially when it comes to microservices. I'm going to create this application with multiple microservices which may get deployed across the cloud, right? It's not only like I have to think about only my applications. So what are all the kind of security infrastructures I have to take care of it? What are all the network requirements I have to take care of it? So this has to evolve from the requirement collection phase. All party has to basically involve and see that what would be the requirement from my perspective. It is not only the developers, it's not only the deployment guys who is really deploying in the real world. It's about basically how are we going to interface with all these parties. How are we going to make sure that automation takes care of it, right? Because the deployment is very, very important piece. So when I'm deploying an application, I have to make sure that these two applications are sitting very close to each other in a limited boundary, right? So these interactions between the multiple stakeholders and the multiple expertise, right? That is what is missing in the current thing. And I would say that people are identifying the problem now, because what is happening right now was people are trying to optimize the application infrastructure now, right? And when they run out of the option in the application infrastructure, they're coming to the other options, and one of the options would be the networking. And they find out that, oh, okay, fine. Now actually, I don't have anything to do in my application. What is the other thing I have to optimize it? Probably the applications to application interface, probably how I am deploying my applications inside the network. So these kinds of things are coming up. So the biggest barrier I would say was basically the thought process of an application developer as well as the thought process of the networking guys, right? It has to collaborate with each other, and they have to think as a single dev, ops, and networking guy to make it successful.
Very good. Thanks, Kingston. Tarak, have you anything to add?
I think Joe and Kingston covered the concepts very nicely. What I'll do is I'll just summarize a few key points from the conversation, and that might add something as well, but I'll just keep it short and just summarize a few things. So I think one of the things that DevOps has helped us identify that was missing, and it's getting better now, is the communications across the different teams, the different silos, as I mentioned earlier. So that's definitely a big positive, and as Joe mentioned, it's a big thing. The other area that I think has evolved with DevOps is the concept of a core team. And so typically during any development cycle, the core team was always just some developers and maybe an analyst and a tester. And that has expanded now to include all kinds of people. It includes security people, NetOps people, system admins. So that concept of a core team has evolved to include more disciplines in it. And that's partly because people realize that it's not just enough to have something coded. In order to actually deploy it, there's many more disciplines that need to work together to make it something that will function properly. And then finally, I think something that we talked about is the requirement for a IT professional has changed quite a bit. So instead of having people who specialize in software development or who only specialize in security or network operations, sort of the T-shaped people, the I-shaped people, we're looking for more T-shaped people who have a broader knowledge base in a number of different areas. So they might specialize in an area or have a background in a specific area, but they need to have a broad understanding of how IT operates so that they can be part of that core team, be part of the communications, and ensure that all the different aspects are being evaluated as the system is being developed. And that's something that Google and others have been promoting for a while. And I think Joe mentioned this earlier in a separate conversation that we were having about the site reliability engineer. And I think that's where we're sort of going, is instead of having specialized functions, we're looking for more IT professionals who can play the role of a site reliability engineer with a broad background in software, networking, security, and so forth to help with the full IT life cycle.
Okay, great. Thanks, Tarak. So the worlds are coming together, and I suppose is there an effort to standardize on tool sets to try to make that process smoother, so that I suppose the skill sets can easily transfer from, one area of expertise into the other by using the same tool set. With that?
Yeah, so when we say tool sets, I distinguish, essentially there's a bit of a difference in my mind to tool sets are things like, Jenkins and that, like the standard DevOps pipeline, but really when it comes to standardization, my understanding it's at a much higher level. It's at essentially the cloud provider level. So we all know and love Kubernetes as a cloud orchestration, platform, whatever. It's, it's native support on Azure, Google, AWS, and that's something that's standard across that. And what the cloud providers are trying to do, and I guess this is probably a march towards serverless, right? So ultimately, we all know that software is always going to run on a server, but the level of abstraction you get, is increasing all the time. So all those guys are working on essentially a common kind of interface where really as a consumer, right, and so we're all consumers of their offerings, we're not going to care whether or not it's running on Azure or it's running on Google or it's running on AWS. And the software, to a large extent, will be fairly agnostic. Mm-hmm. So they will be coming up probably in the not too distant future with some kind of provisioning system that essentially, like an API that some interface that they will all implement that will be common across all of them, that you can provision your system. So for whatever reason you want to provision your servers on Azure versus Google or Azure versus AWS, then you can do that. And you will just be paying on a compute basis. You'll be paying for the resources that you use. And I think that level of abstraction will make it an awful lot easier for people that in DevOps particularly, and also people in the development community that are writing software to get it out there. No one really knows where the DevOps specific thing is, what the next iteration of that could be. I mean, you hear things like DevProd and GitOps and all these other terms, and people kind of, it seems like it's going that way. There's going to be a single source of truth for your code, but sometimes those things bring as many problems, and as the solutions that they're trying to solve. So I don't know. The guys might have a better, more input on that, but from my perspective, it's very much up in the air. Certainly, the cloud provider is becoming much more abstracted away, and there is a common interface starting to emerge from there.
Tarak or Kingston, have you anything to add on the tool sets and the transferability of them?
Yes.
No.
So
yes.
From the networking perspective, right? Yeah.
Sure.
So if you see, hello.
Yes, Kingston, we can hear you.
Yeah. So what I was saying was, as I had mentioned, right, the network is moving towards the paradigm of configurable towards a programmable network. Right now, if you see, right, to make the NetOps to be a reality, most of the network vendors are coming up with the programmable API for programming the network devices. So you will be able to program the networking devices using a standard Ansible playbook, or you can interface the network devices with an SDN-based controller, a software-defined controller. And using the software-defined controller, you can write a network application and you can program the network, right? So these are all some of the new tools and techniques which has evolved to make the NetOps to be more practical, and which can work very closely towards the existing DevOps tools. In fact, I would say that the deployment of your applications, the way we are triggering the workflow from the different DevOps tools like Jenkins or different the tool sets, right? You can interface a workflow along with the existing application deployment. Probably you can interface with the SDN controller also, right? So due to this open nature of the network, what happens was basically you will be able to program the network, and you will be able to program in tandem with an application, right? So these are all some of the techniques as of now which has evolved in the NetOps perspective. But in future, I hope that we will be seeing more tools coming up because people are talking more about intent-based networking, wherein network can be adaptive in nature itself. The way basically the different applications are talking to each other, based on the pattern of the network communication, the network can adapt to itself to handle the dynamic nature of the application infrastructure. Okay, so there are a lot of things that are evolving in this particular space. However, we have the basic tool set to make sure that the NetOps is doable and practical at this point of time.
Okay, great. Tarak, have you anything to add to that?
Sure,
No?
Haidee.
Yeah, sure, great.
I'll just make a quick point. So I agree with both Joe and Kingston. They made really good points. I particularly like the point about standardization that Joe made around. It's not just about the tools and technologies, but it's about the environments as well. And as Kingston mentioned, things are moving. The networking side is moving from being more configurable to more programmable. On the application side, you have things moving to more configuration-based. So I think there's a convergence happening between the app side and the net side as well, in terms of the balance between programmability and configurability. I think one area that we'll see more changes happening is a convergence of the tools. So right now, there's a proliferation of tools across the landscape. There's many different tools you can use for builds, for deployment. The networking space is getting a lot of tools with the software-defined networking space. All vendors have their own tools. So I think one thing we'll start seeing is a convergence of tools that can help manage multiple disciplines as well. So just like we have a convergence of disciplines, I think the next phase for that will be a convergence of tools to support that even better.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hopefully. So on that, I suppose it's a hope for the future. What is the future? So how do you see that this will evolve further?
I don't know. I think there'll be a computer called HAL will be telling us all we can't deploy to production. It might be a bit whimsical, but I honestly, there's so much up in the air right now. I don't know where I think there will be a refocus, right? I think everything will become software. I think we're almost there already, right? And exactly as the guys have said, tools will standardize and these things will just become the way that software gets delivered. And something else will be the next buzzword. But I think it comes back to maybe there'll be a kind of a rethinking on, well, what does it mean to have deployed software, right? Now maybe you're coming back to reliability and your uptime and all those other kind of things, right? And where does DevOps feature in that, right? And I think the SRE as somebody that has kind of a broad knowledge, is that something that's going to be transferred through the organization, where everybody is going to have a broad knowledge? Really, to be honest, I'm spoofing a bit here because I really don't know what the answer to that question is. So I'll let one of the other guys jump in.
Anyone want to take a peek out into the future?
I guess I'll go next, and I think a lot of the things that we talked about are still in an infancy stage. We haven't realized, we're nowhere close to realizing the full potential of what DevOps offers. We've just started breaking down the silos between the organizations. As I mentioned, the tools are still, they're great for what they do, but they're siloed as well. So there'll be a convergence of tool sets. We already talked about the convergence of skills in a single professional, such as a site reliability engineer. And as Joe mentioned, I think everything is going to become software. Kingston's talked about this throughout the panel, where he's mentioned how networks are becoming more programmable. They're becoming more software-based as well. And that's the phenomenon of hyperconvergence that we're seeing, where everything is becoming virtualized, from compute to network to storage. It's all becoming software. which is another reason why there needs to be a convergence of skill sets and tool sets along with stronger communication across the organization.
Great. And Kingston, do you want to add to that? We have 5 minutes to go, so maybe if you want to add to that and say your parting comments as well, your parting insight, and we'll go around the table. Have we got you, Kingston? Are you there? Okay, well maybe Joe, I'll have to maybe start making a summary. Say your parting insights.
Yeah.
Oh, Kingston, you
I'm
back?
sorry, I was on mute. Sorry. Yeah, I'm back. So yeah, so talking about the future, right? I'll just take 2 minutes of my time. So the future is going to be very exciting. Why? Because if you see just 10 years before, where were we standing, right? We did not exercise the virtual machines or the virtual machine concepts. We did not exercise the container concepts to the fullest. We did not exercise the serverless concept. But right now, if you see, we have evolved from a physical server to a virtual machine, from virtual machine to containers, from containers to serverless infrastructure, from public cloud to private clouds, and private clouds to public cloud, hybrid clouds. So we are exercising too many things in last 10 years. Okay, this is mostly from the application perspective. Coming from basically the networking side, if you see, the network was typically classified as a LAN or a WAN, and then basically it started becoming a VPN kind of services, and then it started becoming a software-defined networking, network function virtualization. So even the networking side, there were a lot of developments which has been happening for last couple of decades, I would say. Right now, I am seeing that both these developments, along with the storage, compute, as well as the network, all of them are getting converged, and they are coming together as a single management entity, right? Which is basically handled by a DevOps practice or NetOps practice, along with the NetOps practice, I would say. So the future is going to be very, very exciting because a lot of development, a lot of platform has been set for this particular field. Now it's up to how it's going to converge and how it's going to basically evolve and take a new form, right? I hope that in a couple of years, we would be seeing a lot of good practices and a lot of evolutionary technologies after converging these three paradigms of IT infrastructure.
Thanks, Kingston. That's a good hope, and we do hope it goes that way. So with 2 minutes to go, I'll just thank you all for being super panelists. You have maybe a couple of seconds each to say parting words, so I'll go around the table and start with you, Joe.
Yeah, so really all I've got to say is, like Kingston and Tarak, I'm really excited about where this thing is. I'm not sure where it's going to end up, but I'm certainly going to enjoy the ride. From an SRE perspective, I'm very, very interested to see how the concept of error budgets fits into our rapid delivery and see how engineers feel about pushback from there. But yeah, I think I think we're at a really exciting time, and definitely probably the next couple of years are going to be real eye openers for anybody in the IT space.
Great, thank you, Joe. Tarak, you've
yes, I would like to. Yes, I would like to echo the same sentiment. It's going to be an exciting time. And Haidee, I'd like to thank you for moderating this panel. Joe and Kingston, it's been a pleasure being on the panel with you, and I have actually learned quite a bit as well. So thank you so much for the stimulating conversation.
Thank you, Tarak. And Kingston, you have the last few seconds.
Yeah, thanks, Haidee. I would basically really thank everyone for this session. Actually, it was quite interesting. After a long time, I have been participating in a kind of more chatty session like this. Yeah. So thanks, everyone. Thanks, Tarak. Thanks, Joe. And thanks, Haidee. See you on some other time.
Thank you all. You've been super. Really enjoyed it and learned loads. Okay, thank you.
See you guys.
Bye.